I'm joking, but I wanted to see, at least I wanted to make you feel good. I wanted to at least make you feel good, right? To make you feel that you weren't shunned from the list.
I was for a second.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of I Know This Guy, the podcast where we dive deep into the lives of some of the most interesting people I know. Before we get started, please like and subscribe to I Know This Guy wherever you get your podcasts. By the way, my kids want me to say something about ringing a bell. What the hell's a bell?
So, Dad, who do we have lined up for the podcast today?
Well, this is a recommendation that Lil Roberts gave us a little while back, and I can't wait to talk to this guy. His name is Barry Cates, and he runs an experiential marketing company.
Nailed it. What do we have to look forward to?
Well, you know, his backstory is going to be very interesting. However, I'm really interested to hear about how he grew this business from 1999 to this. It's quite a large organization, and he puts together some very unique events. But I'm more interested in how he's handling the whole COVID situation since he's in the event world.
Right. One of the hardest hit of any industries out there. That's awesome. I can't wait to hear this one.
Yeah, me too. So, Barry, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Norm. Great to be here. Appreciate it.
Now, I got to tell you, I know I'm excited to talk to you, but you're not making my glasses steam up. It is hot in here.
You should try seeing what it's like here in South Florida right now.
Oh, I couldn't even imagine. You know what? I live in rural Canada, more cows than people, and it's hot outside, but my house, for some reason, if you're watching on video, if you're watching YouTube, you can see my it's hilarious because my glasses have steamed up. Oh, so we have a mutual friend. Her name is Lil Roberts, and she says you're one of the most interesting people I need to get to know.
Well, I appreciate that. But Lil and I, we met 11 years ago when both of us were interviewing to join Entrepreneurs Organization, which is a global worldwide organization with chapters around the world, and it is for entrepreneurs. As a part of that entrepreneurial journey, it is about entrepreneurs that are the key stakeholders in their own business that have to deal with HR, payroll, cash flow. It's not the corporate side of entrepreneurs where if a CEO or CMO is hired and then gets let go by a big corporation, they get a big giant severance package. Entrepreneurs are all about the sharing experience journey for entrepreneurs. So fortunately for us, I had a great chance of meeting with Lil when we were going through it. And we have what's called the forum that you interview with, and it's 6 to 8 of your entrepreneur peers. Kind of an advisory board. And there's no, what they do is when you join a forum, it's about matching personalities and making sure that there's no overlap on entrepreneurial careers, because it's all about being able to get a different perspective in the entrepreneurial journey. So Lil had already been placed in a forum, excuse me, and I was interviewing in forums, and she made the recommendation to her forum, and I interviewed with them. And since then, it's been 11 years, and the entire forum has been together. And, I just love Lil to death. I just love her journey. I love where she's been in her journey from a personal and professional perspective, and almost just like a sister, so just have the most utmost respect. And I just love her drive, tenacity, and passion, and her thirst for learning.
One of the things I love about this podcast is everybody that I've had a chance to talk to, it's all about sharing. It's not taking. And I think that's one of the common denominators. And I don't know if that just makes an interesting person, but so far, everyone, and we've interviewed probably 30 people now. Hopefully that's going to be double or triple one of these days, but they all are willing to share. I just find it amazing that, that's the one thing everyone has come back to say, or, we hear at the end of the day about just sharing. Anyways, Lil is a great lady. She said you are the most interesting person, or one of the most interesting people that she knows. And one of the things that she mentioned is that you're decisive. You can make a decision on a dime. And I mean, that's what I love about entrepreneurs as well. So I like to dig into that a little bit. I always find it fascinating how, or talking to entrepreneurs, how they became entrepreneurs. And, we're all different birds. I consider myself an entrepreneur as well. We're like the goalie in the hockey game, right? They love to have pucks shot at them. Well, that's the risk factor I find in entrepreneurship. But anyways, can we just dig a little bit into your past? I mean, like really dig into your past and find out, really what makes Barry.
Sure. I think that if I look back at my past, I grew up in Natick, Massachusetts. It was middle America. Literally, my father was a pharmacist. His dad was a pharmacist. His brother was a pharmacist. And my dad always wanted to be a doctor, but he couldn't afford to go to medical school. So, as most parents, at least at my age, being 55, parents got married at a young age. My mom got married at 19 to my dad, and then I was born at the age of 20 or 21. I remember we moved into a brand new neighborhood. And ironically, my next door neighbor at that time, when I moved in at 1, is still my best friend to this day. So, we've been best friends for 54 years. And actually, my whole group from Natick is still very, very close. But what was really interesting that I think I learned was my dad was a very, very, very hard worker. He'd worked 3 jobs, all in pharmacy, and was only making $210 a week back in 1965. He built a house in the neighborhood that all my other friends grew up with. It was just one of those great suburbias. And, I think for me, I started to get a passion and understanding of, I loved what he did from a pharmaceutical perspective. He had always had aspirations of opening up his own drugstore. And sure enough, he ended up opening up his own drugstore after working for his father for many, many years. And he just couldn't work with his dad anymore. And again, his dream was always to go to medical school. But he became an entrepreneur, borrowed some money from my grandfather to open up his drugstore, and actually went into partnership with his college roommate and, ironically, his pharmaceutical college roommate. They were both one and the same. And they opened up a drugstore. And what was interesting is that, back in those days in the 60s, 65, 66, you didn't have the plethora of CVS's and Walgreens and Eckerd's and all of the real commercial drug retailers. He was 24-hour service. And, when a child had a bad flu in the middle of the night, we'd get the phone call at the middle of the night at the house, and he'd go to his store and open it up and get the medicine and deliver it to the house. So I really got an understanding of how hard it was to work, when you were becoming an entrepreneur. But I think I wanted to follow in my dad's footsteps of being a doctor. And I loved how helping people was something that was really something that I found great pleasure on. And I saw what it meant to his customers by just the little things that he did, just knowing their names and knowing their prescriptions and just what customer service was like back in the day. And then, so I was born in 64. And then in 1972, my father in his drugstore was involved in a very sad gunshot accident. And my entire life had changed at that point. My parents at the time were kind of drifting apart. And the accident for him actually left him a quadriplegic for the short term. Boy. And so my entire world had changed at that point. And, I remember my mom taking me and my sister, who's 4 years younger than I, we went to the hospital to see him. And the reason why we went to the hospital to see him is, which we found out later, was that, he wasn't supposed to make it. But then again, as you can appreciate, back in 1972, they didn't have the medical advances that they do these days. He went to a small regional hospital that was proximate to his drugstore in Holliston, Massachusetts. And, it wasn't until they got him stabilized before they could move him over to Mass General. And ironically, they put him in a special ward that was for patients who had serious neck or spine injuries. So my dad had spent 3 out of 5 years in the hospital. While it was very, very drastic and unfortunate, he was left a paraplegic, wasn't a quad. During that time, my grandparents lived in Florida, and my grandfather, who really was a great idol of mine, we were always very, very close. I was the first grandchild. He had come from a family of 5. My great grandparents were immigrants. And what was really interesting is that when my great grandparents came over here, they came over with nothing, and they went into the tailor business, and they started to have success from the tailor business. And this was back in Massachusetts. But what was interesting is that my great grandfather had started to amass rental properties, and as a part of my grandfather, he was putting himself through school. He was going door to door, selling Fuller brushes, selling vacuum cleaners, like just doing everything that he could to help pay for school. And ironically, he also used to collect the rents for my grandfather. And my grandfather was telling me this. My great grandmother actually was telling me the story one day of my grandfather was responsible for collecting the rents, as I had shared, and there was probably maybe 110 doors at this time. And there was this one guy that my grandfather really, really liked, but he was 3.5 months behind on his rent. And my great grandfather really didn't have a stamina for being patient for people that were going to be far more than maybe a month or 2 on their rent. So he used to beat up on my grandfather, got to get him out, got to get him out. And finally, the gentleman said to my grandfather, he said, look, if you tell your father to give me 2 more months of free rent, I will give him 10% of my invention, because he had been working on an invention in his apartment for the past 2.5 years. However, he had just didn't have any more cash. And so my grandfather was doing everything that he could to try and buy this gentleman more time. And finally, after a month, my great grandfather was like, victim, I have plenty of people that want his apartment. And my grandfather had to give him this gentleman the bad news, and he moved out. When we come to find out that the person that was living in that apartment at the time, his name was Alan Land. And Alan Land was developing the Polaroid Land camera. And that's what came to be. And so my great grandfather would have had 10% of Polaroid back in the day if he would have just allowed a couple more months of free rent. But I think that I got to see my grandfather as a young kid, as an entrepreneur. He went to engineering school. He actually was a part of a very small group from the government that they pulled out of engineering school, and they were called the Hush Hush Boys. And back in World War II, there was no jet engines. So General Electric, being in Boston, had tapped the top 6 engineering students from engineering college, and they brought them over to GE. And my grandfather was actually part of the Hush Hush Boys that helped design the first jet engine because of the war. So his tenacity of just always wanting to be a fix-it guy. And then he moved to Florida with my grandmother, and they had 5 kids. My mom's the oldest out of the 5, and got into the hotel business. So I remember at the early age of 6 years old, I'd come and visit him, and I'd go to the hotel with him. He'd never hire anybody to do the plumbing or air conditioning. And this was a 600-room hotel on the beach.
Are you kidding?
He would never hire it. He was, we like to say it's penny wise and pound foolish, right? But he just felt like he could do everything himself. And he used to carry a big giant round bolt of keys, probably had 150 keys on it. And I always used to love to carry his keys. But the thing for me is I had always seen his hard work and ingenuity. And so when I would go visit him at the hotel, I would always be there to greet the guests coming in, and I would take their bags. So I would earn 50 cents or $1, and I was making myself $5, $6, $7 a day, at 6 years old, just toting people's bags when they got to the front desk up to their room. And now, granted, I would take all that money and blow it on the pinball machine that my grandfather had up there. But I think that was really the start for me of really looking at what he did. And then he continued to buy more hotel properties, and, it was just a great guidance for me. But I really did have the desire to be a doctor, and that really had stayed with me all the way through junior high school. And then in high school as well. And my goal was to be a doctor. Again, living here in South Florida, we had really kind of uprooted from Massachusetts just overnight. We never went back for our furniture. I mean, my parents didn't have a very good divorce. Unfortunately, as young kids, you get caught as a pawn. But, I think that I used that divorce as the impetus for my drive, and to say that I was never going to be put in a scenario that I couldn't. It created my desire. When I went into high school, our high school in Miami had a program called Student Leadership. And what it did is you applied for it. And what they would do is they would actually put you in the field that you wanted to study long term. So obviously I wanted to be the medical doctor, but I didn't want to go and sit in the doctor's office and look at sore throats all day. So I actually got put with the department head for Miami-Dade Fire Rescue, the division chief for Fire Rescue. So I would actually have to go to school for just one class, and then I would go to work at the headquarters for the fire station, and I would be at headquarters fire department, and I was working on all kinds of special projects for the chief. And I was riding rescue, and I got to be a part of delivering a baby, and been to car accidents and been to shootings. So for me, I was really it was awesome. I loved it. And, only having to go to class my freshman, for one class, my senior year, it was great, because then the other 5 periods I was out, working in the fire rescue field, and I got a little fire car. So it was really, I would go and pick my friends up for lunch, and we'd only have an hour. So we'd go put the lights and sirens on to get to the pizza place so I could get everybody back in time. And then, I ended up putting myself through school. I was going to go to University of Colorado in Boulder, but there was a better shot of being a Miami person, getting into college, the medical school, from being, in-state local. So I ended up going to the University of Miami, and I was actually an athletic trainer. So I was doing athletic training for football and baseball. And ironically, in '83, we won our first national championship. My freshman year was with Testaverde and Kozar, and it was just remarkable. But I used to use, at that time, I was putting myself through school. I was a chem major. I was working another job, and you can imagine the amount of hours that you put in for working with football. And I would use the team doctors as kind of my guidance counselors at that point, because I still had the passion for being a doctor. But I was really starting to get burnt out of school, and just because the amount of hours and having to pay for school and put myself through school, and at that time, the doctors were going through a really bad time with medical malpractice and socialized medicine. And I realized my sophomore year, I was like, you know what? I'm not in the grind for it anymore. And so I switched into marketing, and it was even before sports marketing was even talked about. So I moved into sports marketing for Howard Schnellenberger, which was the head coach at University of Miami back in those days. And, we were on a trajectory of having really good football at that time. But, I was given the phone books, the A through L and then the M through Z. And I was trying to sell sponsorships to the coaches show or to football or whatever it was. So I kind of got a back understanding of what it was like to work hard and try and sell. And I was only making $50 a week. But I would like to reverse back, because I think a lot of my work ethic really was watching my father work hard, watching my grandfather work hard. And then when I was in 7th grade, I got a job at Publix, and I worked at Publix for 5 years till my senior year of, obviously graduated through high school working at Publix. By the time I left Publix, I was working 40 hours a week, and my pay was $2.10 an hour. And my paycheck was $85. Working hard for me was always in my blood. And then my sophomore year, I got a great opportunity for becoming the bud rep on campus. I went to work for the Anheuser-Busch wholesaler. I was actually the number 3 employee hired by them. And I actually took that Anheuser-Busch job, started at the very, very bottom, and turned it into a 13-year career.
Wow. So you were also the most popular person on campus.
Yeah, because I got to tell you, during my time, there was a Schlitz rep, a Pabst rep, a Miller rep, and a Coors rep, because, we were the last group that was grandfathered in before the drinking age changed to 21. So it was very, very important for the beer companies to go ahead and start build brand loyalty to those consumers that were just starting to be of legal drinking age. So now my pay at Budweiser was $50 a week. I made $25 a week in a salary, and I had a $25 beer tasting allowance. So we would do nickel bush nights at the Rat on Tuesday nights. So you can imagine the amount of beers that I was able to buy. But I had a substantial marketing budget. So we would do Carnegie Gras and fraternity parties that we would do 300, 400, 500 kegs in one night. Those were the great old days. And now all of a sudden, as you can appreciate, the dynamics at college are very, very different because you're not really 21 now until you're a senior. So that turned into a 13-year career for me. And I did everything from all of our events, all of our marketing, all of our sports properties, all of our venues, the on-premise business, which was all the bars, restaurants, and nightclubs that you actually consume beer in, versus off-premise, which are your grocery stores or convenience stores like 7-Eleven, Piggly Wiggly. And then I had a great opportunity of going to work with a race car promoter, and his name was Ralph Sanchez. And Ralph used to do the Grand Prix of Miami downtown. And with the expansion of downtown happening with Bayside and the American Airlines Arena, he needed to move the course somewhere just because the downtown dynamics were changing. And the infrastructure, when he was first doing the race, there wasn't a whole lot going on in downtown. But with its resurgence and redevelopment, he was going to look at, he needed to go find a new place. So he was actually really looking in North Miami. But unfortunately, he had a lot of backlash from the community. They didn't really want the traffic there. They didn't want to race in a racetrack there. And, his goal was to build the Taj Mahal of racing. And then Hurricane Andrew came through in 1992, and there was two brand new spring training facilities that were being built in Homestead because that was going to be kind of maybe the next play for spring baseball. Uh-huh. And unfortunately, Hurricane Andrew decimated those brand new facilities that the city of Homestead spent millions to do. I mean, decimated. And those were going to be the Taj Mahal of spring training facilities comparative to what, is in Phoenix or in the northern part of the state. So big blow from an economic perspective for Homestead. And Ralph cut a deal with the city of Homestead, and that's how we ended up building the track in Homestead. So that's what's now known as the Homestead Miami Speedway. Ralph had spent a couple years there, and then the France family who owns NASCAR came in and bought him out, which kind of left me out because, Ralph was really looking for somebody who wasn't a motorhead that he could teach the racing business to because he wanted to enjoy more family time. And so I actually got that opportunity to do that, but then it was obviously cut short when he got the opportunity of selling it. But what was really unique about it was, I'm not really a big motorhead, but I remember when we were designing the track, we had Emerson Fittipaldi, Jeff Gordon, Dale Jarrett, Dale Earnhardt. We had all of these superstars of racing sitting in a conference room because we were trying to figure out the banking when we were building the track. And, just unfazed. It's like maybe sitting in the Hall of Fame room with all the quarterbacks with Marino and Kelly and Joe Montana and Steve Young and, Bradshaw and Joe Namath, just trying to figure out, what size football should we make and where should the leather go. And so, everything in life happens for a reason. I still had the burning desire to be an entrepreneur. I didn't have I just couldn't put myself over the hump yet. Because again, when you come from the corporate culture, there's a lot of safety there. You have a guaranteed paycheck, you got benefits. When you go onto the entrepreneurial journey, it's, now got your backpack and you're just hoping you got enough water and food to get you till the next rest stop so that you can refill. And then I got called from a headhunter to go to work for PAX and Communications, which at that time had radio, television, and billboard. I did that in the non-traditional revenue side of things. And then we got bought by Clear Channel. And then as everybody can appreciate, you spend 30% of your time in corporate culture, in meetings, productive or unproductive. And I had 4 or 5 clients that I had built a relationship with that said, hey, look, if you go on your own, we'll be there to support you. So in 1999, that's when I finally realized that I would be able to go ahead and have a couple rest stops after I emptied out my backpack with snacks and water. And I ventured off and I opened up my company then. And, my number 2 is a gentleman named Jared Shattuck, and I hired him right out of college, and he's been with me for 20 plus years. So the journey of where we've been now for the past 20 years has just been absolutely amazing. Ups, downs, pivots to the left, pivots to the right, pivots forward, pivots backwards. So that really was the driver, the backstory between my dad and watching him work so hard and my grandfather, watching him work so hard and buy hotels and fix things himself. And, they were entrepreneurs, and that resonated well with me. And then when I realized that I wasn't going to be able to make the difference that I wanted to in the medical field, that's how I ended up pivoting and moving into, the sports marketing side of things. And that's why I love marketing and events. And, it really became my passion. And, I share this with young entrepreneurs is find your passion and the money will follow you, because, when you find your passion, it's not a job, it's just something that you love to do. So.
Okay, so I've got something to ask you, but before I do, I really want to touch on, what are you doing now? You kept in the sports marketing, you're an event company. Tell us a little bit about that.
We started the company off as Innovative Marketing Group. That was the initial name of our company. And then as years had passed, we got into more skills. Originally, we were just doing some marketing, and we were doing events, and we were doing VIP hospitality stuff. And then we opened up another company called Innovative Events. And because we wanted to be, when your name has a lot to say, right? So as Innovative Marketing Group, people look at you as a marketing company. So that's why we opened up a secondary company called Innovative Events. And Innovative Events was really doing a lot of event hospitality. We did the Super Bowl back for Sprint when they were the NFL partner. We did AOL Super Bowl. So we were really big in the event space, sports and non-sports. And it was just so much fun of what we were doing, so complimentary. And we just continued to add on programs and elements to what our business was. And instead of having 5 or 6 different websites, we decided to go ahead and we just created Innovative Group. And then all of our divisions of all of the great things that we do, have now fallen under Innovative Group. So I would tell you that we got big into the experiential side, about 6 or 7 years ago. And experiential is really about immersing brands together. So let me give you an example of what a brand immersion would be. So Jose Cuervo back in the day was not allowed to advertise on radio or television. And we were tasked with coming up with something that would give them a big, giant, let's say a publicity stunt, for lack of a better word. So what we did is, their mantra at the time was about expressing yourself. So what we did was we paired up with radio stations, and we actually did costume contests in the Southeast region. And the radio stations would literally go into these on-premise clubs where Jose Cuervo was served, and consumers would be able to go get dressed up. We'd bring in makeup artists, we'd bring in costumers, and they really got to express themselves through makeup and through these wardrobe changes. And what we did is we actually had the radio stations be the judges for all of these potential costumed characters. Well, as a part of that, we brought on Freddy Krueger, we brought on Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and we brought on Grandpa Munster. And we actually had them going around and doing like the morning show circuits and talking about the costume parties, because the plan is that we would select a winner from each of the states, and then we would fly them to South Florida on October the 30th. So we flew everybody to South Florida on October the 30th. We had a Jose Cuervo cocktail party for them. We had taken it was the Atlanta Hawks team plane, which was like 64 seats. And we wrapped it with Jose Cuervo, and it was flight 1313. And so everybody that had flown to South Florida, we put them on the plane. We had 26 contestants, Freddy Krueger, Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Grandpa Munster were all on there. The other 20 seats were given to media. So we take off at 11:15 at night on October the 30th. And at the stroke of midnight, hitting October 31st, we were flying over the Bermuda Triangle. And so, and this obviously was before, all of the necessary compliance with the FAA and 9/11. So the pilot's doing the big dive, and the next thing you know, the air things are coming out of the ceiling, and it's just one of those great spooky things. And we landed probably about an hour and 15 later. We're serving Jose Cuervo on the plane. There's music going. And the amount of publicity that Jose Cuervo got from that Flight 1313 was just, it's just one of those experiences you can't buy. And that's a lot of what the experiential world is all about, is those experiences that, they call it FOMO, fear of missing out. So those are the kind of things that we really like to integrate ourselves with. But obviously, there's not a whole lot of experiential going on right now, based on the shutdown of events, unfortunately, due to the virus.
So that leads to something else. So you're in the event world. COVID's affected us for months now, and will probably be a few more months. I don't know when this thing is going to die down, but what doesn't the general public see that you might see? Is there anything that's hit the event world or the hospitality world differently that the public's not seeing?
No, I think it's wide open right now. I mean, obviously, you're seeing on either through virtual or TV where athletes and entertainers are doing things from their home because they want to play and they want to be able to interact with their crowds. They just can't do it personally. Obviously there's no hospitality business, but maybe the thing that people really don't realize is that even though the events are not happening, you think about all of the folks from the booking agent side of things that one can't book talent and earn their fees, the stagehands that build all the production stuff, the production houses that own all the equipment and the stages and the lighting, that stuff is now sitting dormant. And, whether it's paid off or not paid off, they still have, debt service for that. So, you think about all of the labor behind things that go into building out an event and a show. All of those people aren't working right now. And it's so, we typically become the end user for the brands. But the unfortunate thing is it takes an army to build an event from the ground up, and that's an unfortunate thing. You're seeing a lot of it in the sports side of things, because with football not playing with fans and basketball not playing with fans, think about all the concessions workers and all of the janitorial people that are working hourly, and all of those people don't have jobs right now. So it's just so sad to see really a lot of the back end of what happens in the event world, that where the effects really, really happen. I mean, you look at MSG, which is Madison Square Garden. They're a huge conglomerate. They let go of 1,000 people. William Morris let go of executives and talent agents. And I mean, the ripple effect is just unparalleled. Personally, for me, I think that, we probably will get to see live events come back in some shape or form. I think maybe by next summer, if, again, my own personal opinion is if a vaccine comes out first of the year, we get everybody vaccinated within the next 3 or 4 months, I think that that'll really start to go ahead and provide a sense of security and really help with people being able to get back into, in more of collective groups. But, the world as we know it today is going to be changed. I think that there's going to be all kinds of things with, we're going to continue to have to manage sanitizing and be very mindful of social distancing, and, because there could be a COVID-20 or something else right behind it. But
right.
So it's just really, really been very, very unfortunate. There's so many layers of people that are affected by it from every part of life. That I was just reading an article the other day is that the nightlife business not open. So what do you do with all these people? Think about all the champagne manufacturers that have made tons and tons and tons and tons of champagne that they're never going to get to distributor. They're going to have to throw away. I mean, it's just so unfortunate. It's almost like I feel like I'm living a bad dream, and I'm just waiting to wake up, and nothing of this had ever happened.
I don't monitor it a lot. Maybe once a week, I'll take a look at what's happening. And I know this is off topic, but it's kind of interesting. But I've seen how many daily cases there's been in the US. But I always thought India, if it catches on over in India, what would happen? And now they've surpassed the US. I think when I looked the other day, there were 65,000 active new cases. And I think that's going to skyrocket over there. I'm actually kind of worried about how many people, like in Brazil and over in India, are going to, catch this. just because of the living conditions. But anyways, I don't know what's going to happen. This is crazy. I know that we've talked about COVID on 30 of the 30 podcasts, but you know what's interesting? You're a sports events guy. So what's interesting is to see how the Formula One has got around this. So the Formula One, now they're racing again, but prior to their racing, are you a Formula One guy?
No, I appreciate all sports. Obviously Formula One, as you know, has primarily been an international based racing
Correct.
platform, and it's really just started to make its way over to the United States over the past several years. So I can appreciate the fans that really are just so passionate about it, but I don't know a lot of the drivers, and so for me, I'm clear. I love what the Formula One does because it clearly is an elevated hospitality experience, and I love that about that. It's all high end brands, and it really is just something special in the racing side of things. But while we're talking about racing, the Indianapolis 500 was supposed to be with 20% of the fan base, which was going to be about 80,000 people. And just last week, they decided to have no fans there because of the amount of positive cases that have tested in
Wow.
Indiana. So, you see what basketball's done, by having everybody in the bubble and they're tested and they're very isolated, where unfortunately, in baseball, it's kind of been hit or miss, being from South Florida. Unfortunately, a few of the Marlins contracted it, and it delayed their opener by several days. And, they were playing the Phillies, and the Phillies were here ready to play. And, they ended up just having to hang out at the hotel for 3 days, waiting for all this stuff to go by. And, you got some places, in football, football's coming up, and we've been having conversations with Tampa Super Bowl and College Football Championship because it's going to be hosted here in Miami. But, the new Las Vegas Raiders have a multi-billion-dollar stadium, and they're going to be opening their football season and said there's going to be no fans allowed. Whereas some other of the NFL teams have said that, they'll have limited number of fans. But there's still so many unknowns and so many unvariables. Here's the one difference where I think, after coming out of 9/11, if that was such a shock to our country. But the one thing I think that is different between 9/11 and COVID for a community is that even though it was so somber of what was happening during 9/11, there was still an outlet for the United States citizens to be able to go to sporting events or concert events and just go to those events for 3 or 4 hours to take their mind off of the somberness that was going on in the United States. Whereas the virus that we're living now, there is no recourse for that. There is no going to a concert or a football game to get away for the 3 or 4 hours of what's happening in the environment. We're living it day to day. And so the entertainers and the athletes and everybody else is living it as well. So you can see being cooped up that when you don't have an outlet like that, just to get away for the 3 or 4 hours, it just helps in the mental acuity side of things. And that's something that I think that we're all really yearning for because of being either stuck at home or stuck in an environment where you're just, we've been shut down since March. So, it's just unfortunately the nature of what we're living in right now. But I would share with you that I think that with all going on, half the battle is just attitude. And if you can maintain a positive attitude and just think positive about it, I just think it's half the battle versus just climbing underneath the desk and, waiting for this thing to pass us by in however the time frame may be.
Right. That's interesting that you say that because I've been cooped up. I'm one of these guys. I think I've been outside. Hayden will probably nod his head here, but 3 times in the last 3 months, literally outside. I have a health issue, and I don't. If I get this, I know I'll be one of the victims. So I've got to be very careful. But during this time, like I could have, just crawled up, did nothing. But we've got 2 new businesses that launched and 2 podcasts. So, it's just keeping it going, keeping your mind going. I'm lucky that I'm in the e-commerce game too, but there's just so many, for everything that's against you, there's an equal amount of opportunity out there that you can go forward and either learn, get educated, do something, but it's not a doom and gloom. You can go out there and you can be successful.
Well, I mean, we were launching an event in Phoenix when the NBA just the day before decided to shut down basketball, and we still wanted to do our event. And we were launching a musical and culinary event. We had Billy Ray Cyrus and Lifehouse. We had national talent that was going to be performing in it. They actually were in Phoenix. And we had the entire event built on Thursday. And I remember it was 9:00 at night. I was with myself and Jared Chaddick and Michael Sachs, who's our chief development officer. And the three of us were there and we're like, no, well, let's do this. Let's do this. People need an outlet. And then we realized we're like, the NBA is shutting down all the games and we don't want it to be perceived like, we don't want to be sensitive to what's going on. And then we realized they're like, well, what do we do if God forbid somebody got the virus at our event? That just wouldn't be good. So literally the production guys were getting ready to load up their truck to head to the hotel. And they had spent 5 days building out our event site. And we said, hey guys, we got to pull it. And they're like, what? So yeah, they all unloaded out of the truck and we started breaking everything down. We canceled the event. And I remember the next morning sitting down with the guys at the hotel and I'm like, guys, at that time, we started getting all of the messages from our clients. Hey, this is canceled. This is canceled. This is canceled. We literally went to zero revenue. We had so much stuff on the books. We went to zero revenue. And I said to the guys, I'm like, guys, we gotta dive in and figure out, what's it going to take for us to carry us? Because we figured in March, you know what, let's figure out 6 months, right? 6 months, we should be out of this. And so let's figure out what it's going to take for us to be able to get over the hump in 6 months. And we looked at every line item. And of course, back then we didn't know anything about PPP, what the support was going to be from the government. So we had a plan in place and we were going to have to let go a lot of people and furlough people. And we were really concerned about what are we going to do? Like literally we were this close to looking at potentially being out of business and not being in existence anymore. As an entrepreneur, sometimes the light bulb goes off and, we had some relationships that are in the manufacturing side overseas and we have healthcare partners and we got into selling PPE. So we got into the mix of selling gloves and gowns and face masks. And, that really we pivoted everybody. We put them into areas that they had never, logistics, we did whatever we could to try and figure out what was going to allow us to stay alive during this time. And so we had some successes with that. And then most recently, we have been working on getting testing launched because testing is such a hotbed right now where the delay in getting results back. So we have put together our team and we submitted our application to the Department of Health and Human Services, and we're waiting for that to come back, but we're hoping to get testing launched, the first week of September to help make a difference and get people results back a lot quicker.
Hayden, have you ever seen one testing site in Montreal or Toronto?
Not in person. I know when I was first picking up in Montreal, they had drive-in testing sites on the side of the road.
Because I've never seen it. Now, again, I've only been out 3 times, but anybody I've ever talked to, nobody has seen a testing site.
Yeah. So there, fortunately, part of the reaction here in South Florida is that, they took the stadiums over and the Army National Guard came in to provide testing. But the problem is that, the testing is going to independent labs and the independent labs are just so bogged down where you hope to get your results in 48 hours. It's now taking 7 days, 14 days. I can tell you one of our team members went to CVS, got tested. They said he'd have it in 72 hours. He got it 20 days later. And, and obviously all the symptoms went away and it came back negative 20 days later, so even if he had it, the 20-day lag time, I can tell you that we were in Cape Cod for July 4th. And I have a family of 5. And ironically, or unfortunately, we had found out 4 days later that somebody in our group had tested positive. So like we're scrambling now to go get tested because we had a flight the next day and we were never going to go ahead and get on a flight knowing that there was the potential that we had it. So we literally spent 6 hours waiting at a walk-in clinic to go ahead and get the test. And fortunately, we did the 15-minute antigen test, which is the testing we're planning on doing. And we all came back negative, but it delayed us an extra 3 days on flying home. So, and I have a 6-year-old, so the nasal swab's not very comfortable on
Right.
when you're having to do that. But so we're hoping that by us coming in and being able to do testing where we can get you your results within 15 minutes is going to help to try and ease some of the pain of the delay and getting results back.
So I'm curious, Barry, you're one of the first people that I've spoken to about traveling. So what was it like at the airport, getting onto a flight, the security, what was that all about?
Well, when we traveled during July, it was finally at the point where we're like, we had to do something. Like we were just so, when you're in the house for all of these months, right, you're just going stir crazy. So it was just such a pleasure to be able to get away. And we went to an environment that was, again, remember, as I shared with you growing up, my next door neighbor of 55 years, he has a place in the Cape. So it was just him and his wife and the kids, and they had been hunkered down there the entire time as well. So we went to the airport, and I got to tell you, it wasn't very, very busy at all. It took us no time to get through TSA. Everybody, of course, is wearing masks. And then, none of the airport lounges are open. So you're sitting over by the gate area. And when you get on to the plane, they literally at this point just hand you a bag. And in the bag is hand sanitizer, a bottle of water, and a little snack bag, some peanuts. And they were... the fortunate thing for us is there's 5 of us flying. So 3 of us were together in one row. And then my 2 girls sat in the row next to us, and the middle seat was open. We weren't with anybody. There were people behind us. And the American did a pretty good job of trying to keep the middle seats open, to try and help with social distancing. But they were all about keep your masks on, and unless you were just drinking from your, a snack or whatnot. And the flights were not heavy at all. Actually, on the way back, I was more surprised at how much more full they were because there were a lot of middle seats that were taken. And, at the airports, very, very limited services. Coming back from Boston, there was only one place that was open serving food, and they only had 2 people working it, and the line was 50 people. So just the mere fact of being able to leave South Florida and go to Cape Cod, where you're dealing with temperatures that are in the mid 70s and the humidity is not nearly as drastic as it is here. It was a great retreat just to be able to get away. And then ironically, my family and I were very sensitive now on the flying side of things, just because coming from Florida and because it is such a high rate of positive, we're actually driving to North Carolina to go to vacation.
Wow.
We rented an Airbnb up in the mountains, and we're going to do the 12-hour drive. And do that.
You going up to Boone?
Yeah, actually we are. We're going out right outside of Asheville. Yeah. So just excited about getting away and getting out of the summer heat here. But, I've had chances to fly for business and other meetings to go and fly for business, and just, it's not worth chancing it.
Yeah, right. It's interesting how times have changed. Nobody could have predicted COVID, but I remember being in the Hong Kong airport, and there was a family that was sitting there, a family of 4 or 5, and they definitely had the flu, and it was like a rainbow of colors flowing out of every orifice of this family. And I was nervous. I was really nervous because I just don't want to catch the flu. I didn't want to catch a cold. So I went up and I said, and this was after swine. So especially in Hong Kong, they were supposed to be taking these precautions. I felt like I was being interrogated. It was, if you don't want to go on the flight, then leave. And it was like, this family obviously they have the flu. I'm not trying to rat out anybody. It's for health, the whole plane. And it was, look, no. And they actually got quite angry. And I wasn't raising my voice. I wasn't screaming. But I was just stating a fact. And it was either, accept it or take a hike.
I think from our end, all we really try and do is to be as sensitive, follow the rules. We have plenty of hand sanitizer. We have plenty of masks, and just do everything that you can to not be contributing into spreading it. That's why when we were in the Cape and we were around somebody, and this was 4 days prior, so the incubation period during that time would have had effects. Would have shown up in your system if you got tested, not necessarily within 4 hours, but 4 days later it would have, which is when we all got tested. So we're all negative, and you just feel good about it. But it's just a very, very trying time of what's going on, and it's like how you've pivoted, we've pivoted, and others have pivoted too. But there's so many people that have just not had the chance to pivot, and it's just so sad to see that we can't be nearly as robust as we need to be. There's no bed taxes. There's no other things going on the government side of things to help support the local community. So I'll be really, really happy when this cloud passes us by, as I'm sure the rest of the world will be as well.
Hey there, guys and gals. That concludes part 1 of our interview with Barry Cates. Make sure to tune in next time to hear the rest of the interview. As always, make sure to subscribe to the podcast. It helps us grow our audience and keeps you in the know of every new episode we put out. That's enough of me, and I'll see you next time.